I truly do believe that recovery is one of the most beautiful things that we have. And if I didn't have recovery, I don't know that I would be able to appreciate much else in my life. I don't know that I would be alive. I knew growing up in Iowa in the 80s that being the boy that I knew that I felt that I was inside really wasn't going to be an option for me. So I tried the best that I could to be the girl that my mom expected me to be, but found that to be quite a challenge. And as I got a little bit older, it became clear that my peers, other teachers, society around me was going to have challenges with accepting that. And I started to lose sight of that little boy. And I'd say that I lost sight of that right around that great time of puberty. And as those changes in the body started to happen, that really did change the course of my life as well. I became very involved in sports as a way to kind of work through some of that gender dysphoria, that disconnect between that internal sense of self and what my body was projecting to the outside world. And really found a home in the world of hockey, which was a place that I could be the only girl and kind of blend in as one of the guys out there, save for this flowing brown ponytail that was sticking out of my helmet. And unfortunately, that did start to look like a target on my back, and I did take some concussions. And this was around the same time that my mental health started to be challenged. And not surprisingly, as I was feeling pushed out of that sports world, I also was feeling some pushback in school and found myself going from the kid that was kind of friends with everybody to being the kid that was getting pushed into the boys' bathroom and didn't have anyone to sit with at lunch. So at age 12, I started to experience mental health symptoms for the first time, and that manifested mostly with depression and anxiety. And I would get up, and if I could get from my bed to the shower, maybe I could get from the shower to my mom's car. But by the time we got to school, my palms were all sweaty, and my thoughts were racing, and my heart was just pounding. And I just kept wondering, what are these kids going to do to me today? So I would just curl up and go back to sleep and end up sleeping all day at home. But my mom was a social worker and got me in front of a psychiatrist, psychologist, and I was diagnosed then at age 12 with major depression and anxiety. I did take a hit while playing hockey that for the first time I couldn't get up from. And I was struck from behind, thrown headfirst into the boards, and when that happened, I was knocked out, knocked unconscious, and ended up dislocating my shoulder. That put me on another kind of different route, and I started to hang out with some different people. Ultimately, became addicted to cocaine and subsequently crack cocaine. I had a suicide attempt near that time that did end up leaving me with both an anoxic brain injury and a traumatic brain injury. So an anoxic brain injury meaning that my brain was deprived of oxygen enough that it did create some brain damage. I wouldn't know for many years later what that damage would be, and continued to pour chemicals on what were essentially live wires for many more years. Subsequently replaced the crack cocaine with alcohol and found that to be equally as dangerous to my brain. The consequences of my chemical health and the challenges I was experiencing around polysubstance chemical dependency were absolutely starting to eat away at my core and at my soul and at my life and relationships and family. And to be so cliche, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I decided for the first time that I was going to go into a treatment program myself. The 7 treatments that I had been in prior to that during the ages of 17 to 23 had been either forced on as a juvenile or were a result of my getting kicked out of school, for example. And for the first time, I decided to walk into a program and get an evaluation. And I was told then that I should go inpatient. And I responded that I'd like to try this on an outpatient level. And the counselors somewhat doubted me, but I really felt that I needed to learn how to integrate some of the triggers of the outside world, things like liquor stores on the corner, to learn how to manage that rather than be secluded from it. And for whatever reason, that treatment worked. I think I was just ready to get well. After that, a lot started to fall into place. I got on a treadmill and started running, developed some really healthy coping skills, went back to school and finished my college degree, and decided to write my first memoir, which I had wanted to do since I was in college. And as I did that, a lot came to the surface. But this was my story of early mental health challenges, the story of my addiction, recovery, persevering through adversity. And yet, all this stuff about wanting to be a boy kept seeping in. And I realized that a closet door had opened that I could no longer close. And this really hit me in the same way that addiction did, in the sense that I knew I had a lot on the line, that I could end up losing my partner and my relationships with my family, my friends, if I were to take this leap and come out. And that really amplified some of those mental health symptoms, which did turn out to be mixed feature bipolar as opposed to major depression. And it feels like something like a fireworks show to me, where the emotions really get all tangled up into kind of a blue, depression, red, anger, orange, agitation, yellow, anxiety, and it just pops faster and faster until I have to wonder what is going to happen next. And so it mixes this irritability with this depression in a way that at that point I really didn't have the coping skills in place to know how to manage that. I didn't know what my correct diagnosis was yet, didn't know how to manage the gender dysphoria, and that did lead to a second suicide attempt, unfortunately. It was only after that suicide attempt, which put me in a medically induced coma, and I'm very grateful and lucky to be cognitively intact and alive, that I realized that I needed to really tackle this and address this much the way that I did my mental health and chemical dependency, and take the bull by the horns and start the journey of, to me, what would be recovery to become the man that I am today. And if I hadn't taken that journey and had that multifaceted approach to recovery, I don't think I would be here today. It is very difficult for the trans population, and there are studies that do show that upwards of 41% of individuals who identify as transgender will have a suicide attempt in their life. The number one risk factor for that is family rejection. And so, for an individual who might have a dynamic like that, it would be very easy to start to self medicate. And then the mental health starts to become a challenge, and subsequently, we have that vicious circle. So, it's easy to see how folks that might be in those situations, if they're not in an accepting environment, especially, could start to fall down that rabbit hole very, very quickly. There are a number of things that have helped me in that recovery journey, and I really feel that I was able to lay the foundation of that when I got sober and started building what I call my coping skill tool belt, so that I know kind of what coping skill I can use at what time. And out of that, I think I was able to build something of a repertoire of tools at my disposal that ended up also being passions. So, i.e., exercise, running, something that is good for not only my neurological condition, but certainly good for our emotional health. That's something, though, that I certainly didn't want to create a replacement addiction. So, it's something I have to be very mindful of, knowing that I have a tendency to be very rigid in my recovery and fear that if I take one step off the line, that everything's just going to fall apart. So I often worry with running, that if I take a week off from running, then I'm not going to be able to get back into it, or could end up having challenges in that regard. But I've found that it's very important for me to look at some of that routine, find routine, but yet be somewhat flexible with myself, if that makes sense. That I'm not forcing myself to get out for a run every day, because that wouldn't be a little bit too much for me. Knowing that I have a structure to that, and if I need to alter that structure, that's okay. It will still be there for me to have that opportunity to run tomorrow if it doesn't work out today. I got sober in February, and as the season started to change, and I got outside and I had started running at that point, and I started to get up early and change my sleep cycle a bit, and found this beautiful thing called the sunrise. And it just turned on this part of my soul that had been just mute, or I wasn't able to hear it for many years through the course of my chemical dependency. And I think that connection with nature that I developed early in sobriety is something that now, through the course of my life, without the other challenges, that I can go back to, and that I can find that connection with nature in a way that reminds me that life is beautiful, nature is beautiful, and recovery is what has allowed me to see this beauty. So I had to just tune out the outside world and recognize that for me, for my particular journey, this is what I have to do. And if the rest of the world doesn't accept it, that's okay. I'm accepting myself, and that's what's most important right now. And I think that's the only reason I'm still alive, to be honest. That if I hadn't come to that place of acceptance, I don't know if I ever would have come to terms with my gender and then been able to process or be with the reality of some of those hardships that are around us. I truly do believe that recovery is one of the most beautiful things that we have. And if I didn't have recovery, I don't know that I would be able to appreciate much else in my life. I don't know that I would be alive. And in that sense, I think recovery is the definition of beauty.